Good morning and good day to everybody on the live stream. I'm Patrick. I lead the product team at Hedera. Who's Patrick? I have a comp-sci background from Australia. A lot of people have tried to tell me that doesn't count. I don't know what to say. I've been a developer, a security architect, a consultant, an identity architect, a CTO. I learned about Hashgraph maybe 2 or 3 years ago, got very excited, and that's why I'm here actually now. So this morning, I'm going to share a little bit more about micropayments. Not the sort of the technology per se, we just think we can do this, but more what can this be used for, why it's important, why it changes the way businesses and consumers sort of do business online actually. So I'm going to sort of share a little bit of background, describe some of the use cases. I'm going to bring on a special guest. And then, as Lehman mentioned, I'm actually going to do a demo of some stuff we've been doing around micropayments in the browser to actually sort of highlight the utility of this right at the end. We'll see how that goes. The demo gods have rarely been kind to me, so it'll be interesting to see how that works out. So I think it's fair to say that the internet has lacked a sort of ubiquitous economic layer, and without it, it's sort of shaped a lot of the current business models that exist on the web today. We've basically taken a payments network that was essentially created 50 years ago and designed for really purchasing physical assets, and we've tried to retrofit that into the digital world. And we've done a lot of things in the, a lot of business models have emerged around that, but I think it's starting to show its cracks. And we've got some highlights on that. Sort of one example is just the world of like newspapers and online newspapers, and the fact that I get very frustrated that I want to read an article online, and I don't really want to have to sign up for a year-long subscription to something just to read that one article. It just, I'd prefer not to have to do that. We've also seen examples of streaming services where I have subscriptions to certain things. Now, to be honest, in the case of a Netflix or an iTunes, I actually am okay paying $8 or $9 a month to actually be able to access every single song or every single TV show ever created. All right, that actually works for me as a consumer, surprisingly enough. But generally speaking, when when I feel so good about something, somebody else is paying the penalty. In this case, it's likely the artists, all right, or the content creators who aren't necessarily being rewarded as efficiently as or effectively for their content as they should be. I heard last night that in the case of music artists with their streamed music on some of these services, they might only be paid a fraction of a penny for every stream, and won't actually see that royalty for 2 years, something like that. So, I don't know, someone always pays the penalty. Another example is in the context of advertising, okay? So we see a lot of free services that have emerged online with sort of advertising being the backbone of how they sort of monetize those services. And as Tim Cook said, people have started to realize now that nothing's free. I mean, there's no free lunch. If you're getting something for free, then likely you're the product in this specific case. Okay, so timing is everything here. We've let sort of Web 2.0 play out, and it's starting to see the cracks right now in some of these business models that have come online and sort of have started to emerge. And we think we can do better actually. And I think micropayments are going to be the key to that in many ways. So let's look back. I mean, micropayments, or the notion of micropayments, aren't a new thing. When I say micropayments, generally we're talking about something, the transfer of small sums of money, generally less than $1, all right, down even into fractions of pennies. The term was actually coined in the 60s by this guy, Ted Nelson, as part of this project called Project Xanadu. Actually, I discovered he actually invented hypertext, funnily enough, around the same time. He was actively involved in pushing this for a long time, but it never was adopted by Berners-Lee in the initial World Wide Web proposals. Imagine if we actually had incorporated payments in, like, 1990. At that point, we'd be in a very different world right now. It didn't happen. And it sort of remains unsolved, actually, I think, even though we've seen a lot of companies emerge and try to solve it over the years. Again and again, to be honest. But why didn't they succeed? Why did they fail? Generally, I'll roll it up into sort of 2 to 3 areas. One and foremost is actually the cost of the transactions. They actually couldn't make the fee structure work so that it was cost effective to move, values of less than $1 online between parties. Second was the latency and the performance. Third was the user experience, which sort of plays into that. The user experience, if consumers are going to adopt this, has to be really, really good. Okay, so those basically 3 main things really were the breakdown of why these things haven't succeeded. We think we can address that at Hedera, actually. That's why I'm so excited about this. So what are the challenges? What do we need to solve to basically enable micropayments to actually be adopted? First of all, as I mentioned, it's support payments down to a 100th of a penny or less. These payments should be ad hoc payments. What do I mean by ad hoc? It means that you don't necessarily have to have a pre-existing business relationship with the party you're transacting with. You can literally show up and transfer the value in real time. All right? I don't have to give them my credit card information, my first name and last name, my address, my zip code, the number on the back of my credit card, stuff like that. That's just in the case of a credit card transaction. It can be done ad hoc, no prior relationship, no setup, and things like that. The fees need to be a fraction of the actual payment, down to a 1,000th of a penny. We can't make them free, as Lehman attested to, because we start to deal with spam issues at that point. So there needs to be a fee, but the fee can be very, very small, and sort of a fraction of the amount that's actually being transferred. The fees today, online, Stripe is an example where, Stripe's a great service, but their fee structure is such that you have to pay 30 cents plus almost 3% of the transaction to work with them. Doesn't work for micropayments. And I think it's going to be very hard for a lot of those organizations to pivot to something this small, just a sort of an innovator's dilemma problem, I think. We need ultra-low latency on the transactions. Less than 3 seconds, but sometimes even instantaneous if possible. All right? Again, that comes back to the user experience. Consumers are generally very impatient. They don't want to have to wait for things. We're going to need high transaction rates, high throughput. The performance has to be orders of magnitude greater than Visa. If we're talking about now, millions or billions of consumers online doing sort of micropayments, or businesses online doing micropayments, we're going to go well past what we think of as high performance from a traditional payments network infrastructure today. I mentioned ad hoc, no prior business relationships. But lastly, again, the user experience is key here. It's going to have to be fast, easy, intuitive. And obviously, all of this has to be secure. All right? That's no small challenge. But we think we're on the way to addressing a lot of these areas. Now, what happens if we get this right? What sort of doors does it open for the industry? What sort of new and emerging disruptive business models can we start to think about there? So it starts to allow interactions that can be sort of short-lived and transient. All right, we don't need to necessarily have to justify the setup of long-term subscription models. You can start to engage more dynamically with entities. All right, and remove a lot of that friction that might exist today. We can remove the need for intermediaries. All right, parties that exist literally to basically collect and pay out. All right, we don't need those guys anymore if this is the case. Reducing that friction of payment life cycles. We also can eliminate a lot of the issues you have about collection and float. All right, as a business, if I'm basically accepting payments, even credit card payments, or I'm basically invoicing my customers, I'm generally waiting a couple of days to a few months to actually collect the cash. Micropayments allowed me to be sort of paid in real time. I actually get paid immediately. All right? So we can see less reliance on advertising and all the associated privacy issues if I can start to monetize things more directly and have people actually pay for them directly, as opposed to having to sort of make it up through advertising and stuff like that. I've always wondered as well, when we talk about sort of decentralized applications or dapps, why consumers are going to care that it's a dapp. What does it mean to them that it's using a DLT? All right, there's some articles I've read that realistically, end users don't care. They're actually going to be more worried about what that service does and why it's better than the alternatives. I think they're going to care about micropayments because it's going to offer them up something that's better than the alternatives today, and they're going to understand it. Timing's everything. People are going to realize a lot of the issues that exist with Web 2.0, and this Web 3.0 thing can be 10x better with micropayments. It can sort of change the game on us in that case. So what are the opportunities in sort of B2C micropayments? All right? First of all, we can start to think about monetizing digital content in different ways. Wouldn't it be nice that when Wikipedia is asking me to make donations, all right, but to do that, I've got to give them my credit card information and stuff like that. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just opt in to basically pay them 1/10 of a penny every time I read an article on Wikipedia? Just make that happen dynamically, so I actually don't have to worry about it anymore. All right? Or wouldn't it be nice? I mean, I like the fact I was willing to pay back in the day, a couple of dollars to read the New York Times on a daily basis. I'd be okay with paying like $1 to read the New York Times for a day. I just don't want to have to buy into a subscription where I have to, sort of pay $60 a year or something like that. If I get an article, I'd like to, I'll read the New York Times for $1. Or wouldn't it be nice if I could pay artists directly to listen to their music and know that I was actually paying that artist for the privilege of listening to their song? We're going to hear from Hero FM later, who've got doing some great work in that area that we're really, really excited about. But these payments, I think they can also work bidirectionally. All right? Consumers can be rewarded as well. Okay? They can be rewarded for their activity online. And I'll sort of kudos to Brave and the Brave browser for really advocating in this area, actually. Now, I think they should be using HBAR. I don't think they need their own token, but I think they should be using HBAR for it. But it's that whole idea that sort of consumers can be rewarded for interacting with an advertisement, okay, or answering a questionnaire. Or alternatively, we can start to see advertisers start to pay influencers directly for their endorsements, all right, as opposed to them having to basically deal with middlemen in between. I've also, obviously, coming out of the identity space, I've heard a lot about self-sovereign identity and decentralized identity solutions for sort of consumers as well. That's an area I think is also very exciting. I think allowing users to take control of their identity information and releasing it when appropriate, and sort of managing their own verified claims about sort of information about them, sort of in their wallet, makes sense. We've tried it before in that industry. It's failed. And I think it's failed because there hasn't been the right economic incentives in place for all the parties involved. So if there's no sort of, not the right business model to drive the appropriate changes for consumers to care, for service providers who might be accepting these verified claims to care, nobody's willing to change. I think micropayments can change that. I think a business or a sort of a merchant that's willing to accept a verified claim to say, this email address for this user is verified, or this phone number, or this address, they'd be willing to pay for that because it means that they don't need to actually go and verify it themselves. It saves them money. And they might be willing to pay a small micropayment for that information. And that micropayment can go to the consumer, as well as to the issuer of the verified claim. And suddenly, there's a sort of an economic incentives for people to start to adopt these capabilities. that, again, it gets underpinned by having a micropayments layer that can be adopted by everybody, and you start to see different business models emerge. The other area that gets talked about a little less is actually in the area of B2B. I think there's huge opportunities in B2B micropayments. We've heard a lot in that world about sort of the whole notion of the API economy or data monetization, where organizations are exposing APIs to their business partners with the intent of monetizing the information they have inside their walls. They might have done machine learning or AI on it. They might just have business models where they're selling that data. The business models that have emerged around that have either been sort of open APIs, where I open that API up and allow anybody to access it, or I'll call it a closed API, where you have to have some business relationship with me. You have to have given me your credit card details, or we've basically worked together to sign on a contract where I'm going to invoice you for the number of gigabytes of data you get from me, or the number of API calls you make to me, or things like that. We can start to incorporate payments, micropayments, directly into the API requests between clients and API providers. So people, organizations can be paid in real time for the data that they're releasing to, or for the service they're providing to an API client. This can open up different business models. Okay, you can start to offer fractional access to this information, or a try before you buy, things like that. Okay, it allows people to make these services and data available without necessarily having all the friction of having to do a lot of sales and accounting and stuff like that in that place. One example I've thought about and been involved in a little bit is in the area of open banking. So open banking is an initiative that's happened in Europe and the UK, and it's actually happening elsewhere in the world, where the banks are opening up APIs to third parties to both share account balances of their customers, as well as to actually accept payments. But I'll just focus on the account balances piece. Now, in the UK, they've been regulated. They've got to do this for free. Okay? And again, I've always come back to there's no free lunch. Banks aren't necessarily going to like this. But with micropayments, they could actually ask these third parties, a third party like a Mint or a Yodlee, to actually pay a fraction of a penny every time they request an account balance for one of their customers. Suddenly, you've got economic alignment with these entities, and the banks aren't doing it for free anymore. Now, yes, I understand that you're talking about a micropayment in cryptocurrency to get the information about my account balance in fiat. So, yeah, we're combining the two worlds a little bit there, but it's certainly possible. The other, as I mentioned, is that when you get paid in real time, you avoid the need for float. You don't actually need to basically wait for those payments to come in. It improves your cash balance, stuff like that. Lots of good reasons there as well. All right. So I'm actually going to bring on a special guest now. Jon West from Thomson Reuters is going to share for a few minutes his enterprise perspective on micropayments. Really excited to hear what they're doing. Then I'll come back on after that and walk through a demo of how we actually think micropayments actually can work in the browser. But hey, I want to welcome Jon up to the stage right now.
Hey. Thank you. Thanks, Patrick. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. It is great to be here. As Patrick said, I want to share an enterprise perspective, and specifically a Thomson Reuters perspective on the work that we're doing in digital currency and micropayments and how we look at that. And I'll do that by also explaining a little bit about what we do. You need to understand that. So on one side, most of our business is focused on creating software for accountants and lawyers. And I'll come back to that in a second. A small part of our business revenue-wise, but a very large part brand-wise, is our Reuters News of Product, which people recognize around the world. That reaches 1 billion people a day. And so it's reporters in the field that are gathering news and reporting news and providing that. And so that lends itself very well to microtransactions, especially in digital currency, because we start to look at how can we offer that in different ways to customers, to existing customers, but even to new customers that, to Patrick's point, don't want a subscription. They want to get in and out. It's ad hoc, it's occasional, or whatever the case might be. So that's one area. Coming back to the legal and accounting space, we do the same thing. We curate lots of content for lawyers and accountants. We gather, it's petabytes online. We gather rules, regulations, laws, court cases from around the world, tax and legal, and put that all online with sophisticated search engines and AI so that our customers can use that on a daily basis. That too lends itself to how can we make that available differently in a micropayment perspective and generate new revenue, but also serve existing customers better. Then another part of our business in the legal and accounting space still is we create software that lawyers and accountants use to run their office. So it could be an accounting firm, a legal firm worldwide, or a corporate tax department, a corporate legal department. You know, they're not outsourcing everything to a firm. And it could be workflow software or document management software or client engagement type software, but it's also a big chunk of it is tax and accounting software for accounting firms and for CPAs. So we do taxes, you know, in 150 different countries around the world, and we have accounting systems for general ledger and you know, asset management and flowing to the financial statements. So what gets really interesting is in a digital currency world, there's going to be trillions of transactions, perhaps trillions of transactions a day. And we have software, tax and accounting software, that processes those transactions, fiat currency transactions today. So we look at it from a digital currency perspective, and we say, there's different properties here. You know, it's programmable money. It's immediate settlement. There's different attributes about it, and we ask, can we do it differently than from a fiat currency perspective, or should we do it differently? And the answer is yes. So one simple example is everyone knows when they buy something, a cup of coffee, or a business buys something in a transaction, there is tax on those transactions. And so we think about, okay, trillions of transactions. Most of those, many of those, are going to be taxable events. And they all need to be accounted for. They all need to flow to the financial systems and the financial statements. And back to the when you buy something, how can we do tax differently? There's tax on it, and today most people aren't familiar with the complex process behind the scenes that happens. Taxes were designed back before even cross-border trade existed, let alone computers and internet commerce and now digital currency. And so governments are eager to figure out, how do we solve this problem? How do we fix this? How do we improve this? So when you buy something today, the business is responsible for using software like ours to get the tax on there, to get the tax on the invoice, to collect it, to remit it, to comply, to do a tax return. The governments are responsible for doing their administration piece. It's expensive for both parties. It's error-prone. It's prone to fraud, evasion, and it has costs. So what we're working on is actually that tax amount, giving businesses the opportunity to opt into a system that handles it for them, sort of like a payment processing, a tax and payment processor. So they can just say, I want you to take care of it. I don't ever want to worry about transaction tax again. We calculate it. We present it to the buyer. They can still see, okay, here's the amount that I'm paying to the vendor, and here's the amount that's going directly to the tax authority, the government, whether it's a county or a country, Germany or whatever it is. So it's a split payment. And this is something that, frankly, isn't new. It's been tried many times with fiat currency, and it always fails because fiat currency, the friction, the cost, the complexity. So we can split it, and we can address the problems that are happening today. And the same types of things exist when we talk about real-time accounting and accounting for transactions and the things that we can drive because it comes from digital currency. So those are the reasons why we're excited, just from the content that we provide and also the products that we provide and how they can be impacted by digital currency and the features and the things that we can deliver. So that's what Thomson Reuters is working on. Thanks for listening. I'm going to turn it back to Patrick and bring him back on stage.
Great job. Thank you very much. That's cool. All right. I never thought I would get to talk about tax and cryptocurrencies, but hey, we're bringing it here. I've got a demo. I'm going to start with an overview of what we're talking about here. So this is basically sort of the way we envision B2C micropayments possibly working on sort of a news or media website. Okay. On the left, we have the consumer. They have a Hedera cryptocurrency wallet, likely as a Chrome extension, some such thing, in their browser. On the right, we have some sort of web server or business. They have a cryptocurrency wallet so they can receive payment. Okay. They also, on that side, sort of have possibly some sort of payments software that we've given them that allows them to embed that into their website so it can talk to Hedera and actually handle a payment. So the first step is the user's going to request access to some sort of digital asset, a song, a video, an article, a file. All right. The website's going to basically tell the user that, hey, this costs something now, all right, in that response. The user can then decide, hey, well, am I willing to pay for that or not, based on how much it is? And if so, if they are willing to pay, then, in JavaScript, in the browser, we'll basically create the micropayment transaction and sign that micropayment transaction, with the private key that's in the browser, in the wallet. That micropayment transaction now is going to be sent down to the web server, and the little payment the payment software we have there is going to turn around and in step 4, send that to Hedera, all right, where Hedera is going to, essentially process that crypto transfer. So that a certain amount of currency is now going to be moved from the user or consumer's account into the business's account, in this case. All right? Now, if that payment completes okay, then in step 5, that digital asset can actually be now shared with the user, and they can read the article, watch the video, whatever it might be. So that's in a nutshell. All right? Now I'm going to basically shift, and I'm going to sort of show how we feel this can be sort of adopted by websites and by consumers. If we get the video up. Here we go. So before I get started, I'll just sort of set this up. This is an example website, newspaper article, sort of newspaper website. On the top right, you'll see a tiny little black HBAR logo that indicates that we have a Chrome extension installed that supports HBAR. Okay, the fact that it's black here sort of indicates that the Daily Bugle sort of accepts HBAR if you want to pay for the articles, basically here. All right? So I have that Chrome extension. That's my wallet. All right? It's basically a Chrome extension wallet that's basically installed. And obviously, the Daily Bugle's been enabled to support sort of Hedera or HBAR micropayments, essentially, in the background. So I'm going to start the demo. So we're going to sort of highlight the fact that it still has the existing business models in place. But then, if we pause right there, all right, so that shows that the Chrome extension has, about, my browser wallet has about $20 of HBAR in it. Okay? And if you can see there down the bottom, and I'm actually reading this in real time, all right, it basically says that we're not going to support any payments on this domain. It sort of says 0. So that basically means I've got to authorize or consent to actually any payments coming out of my account if one of these articles costs more than 0. So that means that anything that's on the website that's free, basically I can just read and look at. But if one of those articles costs something, then I'm going to actually have to consent to that in this situation. Now, the whole point of this sort of demo is to sort of make it very transparent to the user. All right? I've done single sign-on demos in the past where basically you show people starting at one place and moving to another place, and they don't have to authenticate. And they go, why doesn't it always work that way? The whole point of this is to actually make it very transparent to the user. So there's a few setup things they have to do, but you'll see in a minute that it starts to get simpler and easier the more they use it. So starting the demo again, you can sort of see that you can see their public key. All right. You can see there hasn't been any recent transactions. Now they're going to click on an article they want to read. All right? Now we let a little sort of thing at the top, and let's sort of just wait a second. Pause right there, actually. All right? So that article costs a small micropayment to actually read. And in this case, there's a little, some JavaScript is popping up to basically allow the user to consent or authorize that they're willing to pay. In this case, it's, I think, 0.02 of a penny or something like that to read that article. All right? They get to authorize it. Okay? They're also saying, hey, anything on this website, the Daily Bugle, that costs 0.02 of a penny, okay, I'm okay with basically paying that for all the other articles as well. So basically, it's consenting to it and then saying, hey, anything else that's 0.02 of a penny, I don't want to be prompted again. Just debit me when I read these articles. So let's keep moving forward. All right. I approve the debit. Now I get to see the article. Notice how the ads have gone in this case. No ads on this page because I paid for it, which would be nice in many situations. Now we're going to go back to the website. We're going to look actually at a video instead. Now, videos for different reasons. Let's pause right there. All right? Videos for different reasons cost more. In the case of the video, it's going to be 0.05 of a penny. All right? So in this case, I need to, because I've only approved previously up to 0.02 of a penny, now I'm going to approve, hey, 0.05 of a penny is okay as well. All right? Let's click forward, keep moving. So in this case, I'm going to approve it and say yes, and we can now watch the video. Very nice. Now, obviously, in the background, I'm seeing stuff debited out of my account, basically. This is all happening in real time. Now, if we go look at my, my wallet or my Chrome extension, if we pause right there, actually, you'll see now that the Chrome extension has gone to green. And that's sort of meant to be a signal to the user that this website not only supports HBAR, but you've actually approved sort of auto debits for this website. So basically, if it's green, you know that if you're clicking on things, it's highly likely you're going to be basically paying for things behind the scenes when you read them and access them. So in this case, my fiat amount hasn't changed, all right, because the amount of HBAR we were talking about was so small, all right? So essentially, even though I've done two things, in dollars, it really hasn't moved the needle at all. But obviously, my HBAR amounts have been debited. If you move forward here a little bit now, you can also see that my defaults have changed on what I'm willing to pay on the site, and also my transaction history for the two transactions I've seen. So now we're going to skip forward. And I'm going to start to interact on this site. I hope you don't get seasick here. Lots of things are going to happen. All right? Watching videos, reading articles, doing all sorts of things. Let's slow it down a second now. All right, if we pause right now. So 7 hours later, I've finished reading the Daily Bugle. Okay? And I've spent all of 58 cents now for all those things that I've seen and read online. Happily paid for them. Preferably without any advertising coming at me and stuff like that. But it's all happened transparently in the background, sort of, in real time. This has occurred. All right, let's move forward a second. You can sort of see all the transaction history of everything that occurred. while you're doing it. All right, so I changed to a slightly different use case. Let's pause right there, actually. So I've always been frustrated that I get sent really interesting articles to read via Slack, via email, via text, stuff like that. And I click on them, and I get put up against a paywall, and I actually can't access that, that article that I'd like to read. And to be honest, I just like to read the article. I actually don't want to sign up, as I said, for that service just to read that one article. All right? So this is sort of an example of how we might be able to address that with micropayments. So if you click forward a second here, if you move forward, the user's going to sort of click on this really interesting article they want to read. I pause there, actually. So now I'm back at the Daily Bugle. This is a different user in this case. Okay? So they haven't been to the Daily Bugle before. They've been told by a friend to read this article. Now, rather than signing up for that $19.99 a month thing to actually read it, guess what? I can actually, because I have my Hedera Micropayments Chrome extension installed, and this website supports HBAR, I can actually approve now just a one-time payment for 0.02 of a penny just to read this article, and maybe never go back to this website again because I didn't like it. But that's okay. I paid to read it. I was okay paying to read it, and I'm good with it moving forward. So if we can move forward, you can see, hey, I pay, and there it is. I get to read the article now. I would love to be able to do this today. Now, maybe I might uplift myself to a subscription service at a later date. All right, maybe it's like less expensive if it's a subscription service, because I actually am okay with that. There's all sorts of business models that can emerge. So sort of in summary, I think micropayments are going to be one of the main differentiators of the Hedera platform. We definitely think that decentralized micropayments can disrupt some of the Web 2.0 business models that are out there. I mean, we can handle smart contracts. We're going to give you a file system. But we're really excited, about the micropayments models here. And basically the fact that it's going to be economically viable, to send runtime, ad hoc, decentralized micropayments between parties. Really, really excited about that. And I think that's a thank you very much. I appreciate it.